this project involves not only Windsor, but Cross Creek and Melrose, and we hope one day Waldo. And so this is the whole eastern side of Alachua County. We want to develop a communications means among the citizens. And of course, ham radio is quite involved. It requires a license, but GMRS radio requires a license, but you don't have to take a test. Basically, it's like buying a fishing license, so it's not hard to get. But we're going to look at today GMRS radio for everyday and emergency communications. So that's what we're going to talk about. So what is GMRS? GMR stands for General Mobile Radio Service, and it's one of the multiple radio services that's run by the FCC or overseen by the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. You've got General Mobile Radio Service, you've got the Family Radio Service, which we'll talk about a little bit, and you've got Citizens Band Radio Service, CB Radio Service, you've got Marine Radio Service, which people use out on their boats, business, there's just 6 or 8 of them, I don't know, but this is one, and it's a licensed radio service. It uses what's called ultra high frequency waves, and we'll get into this more, but they're in the range of 462 and 467 megahertz. So this is ultra high frequency. It behaves differently than, say, CB. The CB guys use what's called high frequency. They're down at 11 megahertz. They can bounce their signals off the ionosphere. We can't. Ours is line of sight. This is meant to be local communications. It's for short distance, two-way communications. Short distance could be 50 miles or something like that, as opposed to 2,000 miles or whatever. So we can communicate around the community through repeaters and other ways. We can use handheld radios, or we can use mobile radios and repeater systems. So a handheld radio, just as like what Mark has there, they're usually around 5 watts. We can use a mobile radio or mobile/base station radio like Candy has, and some of those there. You can put those, attach those to the battery in your vehicle and drive around. And a lot of truckers now use GMRS instead of CB, or you can put it in your house. And then we have repeater systems. Jim, where's that repeater?
That's right there.
There's a repeater right there. Basically, we're going to talk about repeaters, but what a repeater does is it's got an antenna way up high, and if you're down here, you can talk to that repeater, talk on that repeater, and that repeater will receive your signal, amplify it, and send it out to the world. So if somebody's way on the other side of the repeater, then you all can talk via the repeater when you normally wouldn't be able to talk just antenna to antenna, because you just have 2 little handheld radios. So an FCC license is required. You don't have to take a test. It costs $35. That's good for 10 years, and it applies to your whole family. And my understanding is, but not cousins, but some people say cousins.
But according to the FCC rules, they do allow it.
Okay, so Cousin Eddie can get on, use your call sign. So.
No matter where he lives.
Okay, yes.
Maybe in another state.
All right. Now, there is a rule that says when you're on the GMRS radio, you need to identify every 15 minutes and when signing off. So if you're talking with your neighbor or somebody down the street on GMRS radio, you all can yak all day long if you want to, but every 15 minutes, you need to say, hey, this is WRZ M878, and they'll do that. And then when we, yes, Jeff?
Oh, just a question. So if you are a general or a licensed technician, can you use that call sign, or do you need
No.
GMRS?
No, you can only use the amateur license, your amateur call sign on amateur radio frequencies.
Okay.
Good question, good question. I'm K9RFT in amateur radio service, but I'm WRZ M878 in GMRS, and Sue here, my wife, she's also WRZ M878. So if we're talking with each other on the radio, I'll say, this is WRZ M878, and she'll say, this is WRZ M878. We use the same call sign.
But we do trip and use the wrong one once in a while.
Well, once in a while, yeah. On CB, I'm Swamp
Oops, I'm on
Dog.
the wrong channel.
I'm Swamp Dog, but I haven't used Swamp Dog yet, so. But you use your call sign every 15 minutes and when you sign off. You don't have to use your call sign when signing on, like so if you say, hey Jim, this is Reid, are you there? You know, we can do that. But when we sign off, I'll say, okay Jim, this is WRZM 878.
It's virtually the identical rules to what amateur radio is, except amateur radio is every 10 minutes.
Right.
All the other radio services are 15, but otherwise, same rules.
So we're gonna look at the radio spectrum now. My whiteboard's covered up, I see with the screen, but we have medium frequency, high frequency, very high frequency, ultra high frequency, and microwaves. When they first started dealing with these radio waves, I think they got to this area and they said, wow, these are really high frequency waves. Whoa, look at that, we'll call it high frequency. Then somebody else said, hey, wait, here's something that's even higher frequency than that. Well, what should we call it? Well, let's call it very high frequency. Then they found some more waves that, oh man, these are really these are ultra high frequency. And then these waves, they're little old waves, we're microwaves. So that's how those got their name. Ham radio can use all of these, but in GMRS, we use ultra high frequency. And I call GMRS, and this is not a knock at GMRS, because I like GMRS, I like CB, GMRS, and ham. And you can kind of think of GMRS radio as ham radio light. So we're hoping you get into GMRS radio and you start getting an interest in radio and you go, you know, I'd like to be a radio amateur also. So then and some people will do that.
It's a great stepping stone.
It's a great stepping stone. Yes, Hannah.
What does GMRS stand for?
Yeah, it's General Mobile Radio Service.
Oh, okay.
So it's a general service and it's one of the things that can be mobile.
It used to be Class ACB
Yeah,
years and years ago.
So we use ultra high frequency waves. Now UHF, ultra high frequency, is line of sight. That means it can't go over the Earth's curvature and it can't go over hills. And the higher your antenna, the better. So let's think about the Earth's curvature here. I wish I had my whiteboard up, but I'm going to make the Earth's curvature with my hand. Okay, you see this curve here? And there's these two little guys with antennas about 6 feet off the ground. Well, they can't be very far apart because the Earth's curvature is going to catch up with them, and one of them they'll be under the curvature of the Earth. Just like Columbus used to, they say, sit and watch the ships come in, and the first thing Columbus would see is the mast. And then as the ship got closer, you would start seeing the whole ship because it was under the Earth's curvature. So if you have low antennas, they can't see but, maybe 5 miles or so, 5 or 6 miles. But one way to extend that range is to raise the height of your antenna. So if you got one antenna up higher, well now you've got more of the Earth that can be seen between these two antennas, right? Well, if both antennas are up high, now you can cover, you go a longer distance before the curvature of the Earth blanks out your signal. Does everybody understand that? Mm. Okay, so when it comes to antennas, height is might. So the higher your antenna, the better. If you can get up, I mean, up to some point you'll have to talk with the FAA, but federal aviation, they don't want 747s running into your antenna.
Anything over 200 feet.
200 feet? Okay, so you can have an antenna.
You have to register it and put beacons on it.
Okay, if it's over 200 feet, then you got to go through some extra steps. But up to 200 feet, you're good, right? Mm-hmm. So it can't go over hills. So if you live in a hill, let's say that I'm on one side of the hill and you're on the other side of the hill, and we've got our handheld radio. Well, it doesn't matter, you're not that far from me, it's just there's a hill between us. So when those radio waves, they go out in all directions, like the light from a light bulb, but if there's an obstacle in between, there's no light on the other side of that light bulb. You see what I mean? So that's the way these radio waves work. So they can't go over hills, but then the higher your antenna, the more hills you can go over, right? If your antenna can quote unquote see over the hills, well, that's not an obstacle. GMRS is what's called channelized radio. I hope you can read that. It's called channelized radio. In ham radio, we have what's called variable frequency oscillator. It's a little knob you turn, kind of like on your deal. I wish we had car radios now that you just turn the knob to get to the frequency, because I can't figure out how we do this on this new Toyota. But you turn the knob and you dial a certain frequency. Well, and you do that, but you don't do that in GMRS radio. They have channels like your TV. So you just go channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, and the frequency is preset. So if you want to transmit on 462.5625, you just put it on channel 1. CB's got 40 channels. We've got actually 30 channels. So channels 1 through 7 are, you can use a maximum of 5 watts of power, and they have a bandwidth of 20 kilohertz, which don't get too wrapped around that if you don't really understand it. It's just, it's wide, there's something called wideband and narrowband, and if you're talking on wideband and somebody else is on the radio talking on narrowband, their signal's gonna be very low. It's like, I can hear them, but they need to turn up the volume. But, so let's get back to this. These channels here, all the channels actually, can be shared with FRS radios. Let me show you an example. Who's got an FRS radio? Does anybody have one? I thought I had 2 of them here with me.
I didn't bring them.
Hang on, I've got 2 FRS radios here.
While you're looking, I gave 2 of those to Becky's 2 grandsons. And one of them's 3 years old, the other one's a year and a half. And the 3-year-old got it like that, and the year and a half did pretty good too. Although he couldn't talk, he could make noise on it, and he could push a button, so he was happy. What's that? He was what?
I thought you were gonna say he was eating the antenna.
He was eating, well, he probably was eating the antenna. Maybe he improved it by moistening it.
All right. I am on channel 16 here. I just turned the knob. Now, this is a little FRS radio I got from Ace Hardware. Jim, would you just kind of step outside and we'll talk on this thing? That thing will go about a half a mile maybe. And this is a 40-watt GMRS radio that's repeater capable and all kind of good stuff. But let's say my next door neighbor's just got this little handheld radio.
That was me.
Hey Jim, are you out there?
Yeah, we got you like what?
Oh, we got you loud and clear too. Come on back in, please, thanks.
Hey, give your own up.
FRS stands for Family Radio Service. So people that don't have these big, it's gonna be really good to get a GMRS radio, but if your neighbor's got something, you might be able to relay for them. So if Jim lives next door and he's just got that little radio and he's gotta get a message, he can't talk on the repeater with that, but if he's gotta get a message somewhere, he can say, hey, could you put a message out on the repeater that yada, 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 whatever. I can get on there and then I can relay Jim's message. So if Jim wants to send the message to Lulabelle on the other side of town, and Lulabelle's on the radio, I can say, hey Lulabelle, Jim says yada, 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 and she can say, well, tell Jim this, so I can get back and relay him. So relay is an important part of radio because signals are limited in distance, and so we can overcome that by relay. So the first 7 channels are limited to 5 watts, and those FRS radios are always limited to
Half a watt.
well, 2 watts now.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, in
will allow more.
2017, they upped them to 2 watts, but that's a half a watt radio. So anybody that's got those little FRS radios, it's better to buy a 2 watt one than a half a watt one. So, anyway, but now let's go to the next channels here, channels 8 through 14. These are limited to a half a watt. And it doesn't matter if you're on GMRS or what, everybody has to talk on a half a watt. For all practical purposes, we're not going to use these channels. These are channels for like when you and your family are going to Disney World and everybody's got those things. They don't go very far because they're only half a watt, and you and your family are in one section of Disney World talking on one channel, and somebody else is in the other section of Disney World talking on the same channel, you're probably not gonna interfere with each other because they're a mile or so away. You see, so that's the purpose behind that. But for emergency communications, for all practical purposes, we're not gonna use channels 8 through 14. In fact, most of these radios here won't transmit on 8 through 14 because they don't go that low in power. And let me just go forward here just a bit. Then, then we have channels 15 through 22. These are, with GMRS, you can use a maximum of 50 watts. Now 50 watts is quite a bit of power. People talk around the world sometimes on 5 watts. If you don't mind, I'm just gonna sit down here. People talk around the world on 5 watts. And so 50 watt, I mean, not all the time, but 50 watts is a decent bit of power. And so for a radio service that you don't have to take a test, that's pretty good. And it's 20 kilohertz of bandwidth. And FRS radios can share these too, but they're limited to a maximum of 2 watts. So the maximum for FRS is always 2 watts. But GMRS can go 50 watts on these channels. And then the next one,
But you can only talk to them if they have a GMRS license. GMRS license cannot talk to an FRS.
yeah, you can talk.
Both sides have to be licensed.
No, when you're on FRS, you can talk to GMRS. I mean, you can, if you're on FRS, you can talk to GMRS. That's my understanding.
Yeah, if you actually go to the FCC rules, a GMRS station as a licensed service cannot talk to an unlicensed.
Okay, but I'm under the impression they can, but I could,
Yeah.
I'm here, I certainly don't know everything about this. So, and you've been around a long time, so, but anyway, I think the takeaway here is get a GMRS radio. You know, even though these can cross-talk, get a GMRS radio. So, now in these channels here, we have the first 22 channels, and then we have 8 extra channels called repeater channels. And these are channels 23 through 30. Channels 23 through 30 are labeled differently depending on the radio. Sometimes they'll call them channels 23 through 30, and sometimes they will call them channels 15 repeater through 22 repeater. And sometimes they'll call them repeater 1 through repeater A. So just depends on your radio. I've got one radio that calls it repeater 1 through 8, and another radio calls them repeater 15 through 22, and some radios just call them channels 23 through 30. So what happens is, you see here 15 repeater, the received frequency is 462.55 megahertz, but then when I key the mic, your radio is smart enough to know that it's going to transmit on 467.55 megahertz. So wait a minute, I'm receiving on one frequency and I'm talking on another frequency. Well, why is that? Because that's the way repeaters generally work. If I talk to the repeater here on 467, and then that repeater retransmits my signal on 462.55. So an FRS rate, and these frequencies right here are the same as the regular old 15 through 22 channels. So if I've got an FRS radio, I can hear the repeater, but I can't talk with it. You see? So, but if I want to talk, I have to talk on these frequencies, and your radio is smart enough to deal with that, what's called the offset. And the offset here is 5 megahertz, 462.55 to 467.55. So let me show you how that works. Right now, this radio, I don't know if you can see it, but it's set for channel 15, just regular old channel 15. So I doubt there's anybody out there on channel 15. Hey, this is WRZM 878. Anybody got a copy? Nothing. Okay, now I'm gonna put
This
it.
is WRCS.
Okay, I was thinking, who's this coming? Okay, now I'm gonna turn over to 18, channel 19, channel 20, channel 21, channel 22, channel 15 repeater. Let's see if I can hit a repeater. This is WRZM 878. I'm on a repeater in Gainesville. This is WRZM 878. Anybody got a copy?
Jim does.
Yeah, this is WRZM 878. We're demonstrating repeaters to radio class here. If somebody come back and give us a signal report, please.
And where's Herman when you want him?
I know, yeah. This is Boise, Herman and Boise.
Yeah.
This is WRZM 878. Anybody got a copy?
Normally a bunch of people on it.
Normally, yeah, right, but, so,
Hey, this is, WSAP 632, I got you loud and clear. We got
Basically where he is.
yeah, 632, this is 878, WRZM 878. What's your 1020, please?
I'm in, Boise, Idaho.
Another Boise.
Well, roger that, Boise Station. Thank you very much. We're in a radio class here demonstrating repeaters. Really appreciate the signal report. Have a great day. 7-3, WRZM 878, clear.
That's the same guy that we got the other night.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that repeater is in Gainesville. Jim Carr here put that repeater up. He's Mr. Repeater around here. And,
Hey, that's, West Station. We can, barely hear you over the network. WSAP 660.
turn that off for now. But that hit a repeater in Gainesville, and that repeater is connected by the internet to repeaters all over, not I don't know about all over, but in wide parts of the country.
There's about 30 repeaters tied on it right now.
Right, so, in other words, with a handheld radio, I can go, probably hit it from here, but I can go to Gainesville and talk all over the USA. So that guy's from Boise, Idaho, and we got a little antenna here and a battery. So you're getting into some really radio stuff.
Reid, correct me if I'm wrong here, but doesn't that require the maintenance of an internet connection as part of the?
It does,
Yeah.
it does. And so without an internet connection, we're limited to.
Then you're just a local repeater.
It's just a local repeater, right.
But fortunately, I'm at 600 feet, so I'm a pretty big local repeater.
So how repeaters work, what repeaters do is they receive your signal, and I may have misdone the words here, they amplify your signal, the repeater's RX frequency, that's the repeater's input, the repeater's RX receive frequency, receive your signal, amplifies it, and retransmits your signal on another frequency, the TX frequency. So the repeater's got its RX, that's receive, and TX is transmit, okay? So, and repeaters usually have high antennas. How high is your antenna?
650 feet.
650 feet. Jim had his wife climbing the tower. No, it's on the TV-20 tower in Gainesville. And repeaters often use what's called tones. And the most common tone is a CTCSS tone, and that stands for Continuous Tone-Coded Squelch System. And what this is a sub-audible signal that you set your radio to transmit simultaneously with your transmission. And the reason for that is, what this does is keeps everybody off the repeater that doesn't have that tone. So that way you don't just pick up a lot of stray conversations. So the tones are in your radio, and they're number that's like 141.3, is it hertz or kilohertz?
Hertz.
Hertz.
So a lot of people can hear it. You'll hear, when you're listening to the repeater, you'll hear what sounds like a little hum in the background. That's that PL tone. It's, cause a lot of people can hear it. It's kind of down below some people's hearing, but a lot of folks will hear this little hum in the background. They can't figure out what it is. There's nothing wrong with your radio. You're hearing the tone.
So,
And by the way, the repeater, he was mentioning you'll see that repeater right there, two radios. One of them's that receiver receiving you, the other one's the transmitter transmitting you back out, and then there's just a little board back behind it that connects these two together. So whenever it hears something, it keys up the transmitter and rebroadcasts you. So it's really that simple.
yeah, so we can talk for miles around with that thing, because the antenna's up so
It's
high.
that high antenna that
Yeah.
helps.
So you would have to set your TX frequency, that's the repeater's TX. In other words, the repeater's input, you would have to set the tone, and then now you can get into the repeater. You don't have to set your RX frequency, the one that you receive from the repeater. You can set a tone on that one, but it's usually not necessary because there are not that many people talking around that aren't on the repeater. Yes, Sam?
Why doesn't your handheld without the 141.3 tone, why can it hear and why doesn't it reject the repeater's transmission?
Because you have a zero tone set on it.
Yeah.
In other words, you can set a tone on all those other channels too. So let's say if you and your family are out camping somewhere and you say, well, we're all gonna get on channel 16. And then you go, okay, everybody set their tone to 1, 2, 3 or whatever. That way, anybody else in the campground that's on channel 16, you're not going to hear them. It keeps them off. But if they have their radio set to no tone, then they can hear everything. So this right here is called, PL stands for private line, but your line is not private. So let's say if we're talking with these tones, we'll say that our tone is 1, 2, 3 for our simplex. That means antenna to antenna communications.
All it does is just filter your receiver.
It just filters out, in other words, it filters out what you can hear. It doesn't filter out what other people can hear. So I can't hear all this other stuff because I don't want, it's like, hey, get off, don't be interrupting my conversation, but they can hear you if they have a zero tone set.
Guy with this little FRS radio, the kids can hear us.
Yeah.
All they gotta do is be on the same frequency.
Right,
They can
and
hear
have no,
you.
and have no tone. So it's really not a privacy tone, it's only privacy. I'm trying to use an analogy. It would be if you had a one-way mirror, but everybody outside your house could see in, but you just couldn't see out. It's that kind of privacy.
Private line was just Motorola's brand name.
Yeah.
Channel Guard was GE's. you know.
Right.
Everybody had their brand name.
Yeah.
But the CTCSS is what it actually is.
Right. And DCS, nobody really uses that much in North
It's a
America.
digital version of
Yeah,
it. Some people do, but not.
It's not very.
DCS is pretty heavy over on the business channels.
Okay, all right, okay.
Most of the business channels now have gone digital, so now we're playing color codes.
So, but when you get your radio, the repeater here, the tone is 141.3. In fact, this is 141.3 on channel 15 repeater in Gainesville, the channel 19 repeater in Gainesville, and the channel 22 repeater in Gainesville is 141.3.
It's the national traveling code.
Okay,
So it's kind of a gentleman's agreement that if you have a GMRS repeater and you want the public on it, people traveling down the highway, put it on 141.3. But you'll have others, like you go to the Silver Springs Club, they have a private GMRS repeater. You have to be a club member. They've got a different PL tone on theirs, because they want to kind of keep everybody else out. But we use that tone so that we don't end up, if conditions get just right, I'm not getting keyed up by another repeater 100 miles away, or interference noise is not getting into it. It just keeps that channel running for us.
right, and sometimes, say, for instance, a farmer may have a repeater, maybe a small repeater, and they just want to talk to somebody on the back 40. And they just want to talk around the farm, and they'll set a tone. That's a private repeater. It may go 2 or 3 miles. And if you happen to live in the neighborhood and you want to talk on it, you would need to ask permission, say, may we speak or talk on your repeater? And they go, yeah, okay, or no, I wish you wouldn't, whatever. But, so, what Jim is saying, if I understand it, if the tone is 141.3, then it's pretty much, you can get on there, you don't have to ask permission.
Well, yeah, to the most part, it becomes the public repeater.
Okay.
It's just sort of a gentleman's agreement. The idea of putting them on farms is very, very popular. There are a lot of these little low-powered GMRS repeaters stuck in the top of barns.
Yeah.
And they use them to work around the farms with, and it's very, very common.
Okay. Now, handy-talkie radios, let me just show you an example. We've got some here for handy-talkie. They're all different types. This is a handy-talkie GMRS radio. And when I bought this, there were certain features. This is a WRZM 878. Anybody got a copy? That's your Windsor repeater right there. It's good if you're going to get a radio. I've got some suggestions. One is to make sure it is USB-C rechargeable right here. How many of you know what USB-C is? Okay, in other words, it's the little...
Your cell phone charger.
Yeah, it's like a cell phone charger, and let me find, yeah, here it is right here. It's like a cell phone charger, and in fact, I could use this right here to charge my cell phone. But it's after a hurricane, and there's no, my power's out. So how am I going to charge it? Well, I've got this little adapter here that's a cigarette, we call it cigarette lighters, and now they call it accessory ports, but old habits die hard. That plugs into the cigarette lighter in a car. And now I can charge my radio. There are cars everywhere, you know.
You've also got these little battery packs that you get to extend your cell phone coverage, and you can use them on these too.
Right. So I can charge it in the car, and there's another car I can charge it there. And some cars now even have, the newer cars even have an accessory port for that part. Your car has those accessory ports.
My Ford's got it.
Mine doesn't. I got a 2012, so all I've got is that cigarette lighter. So if I want to charge this in my Jeep, I have to plug this into the adapter, and then I plug that in, and now I can charge it in my Jeep. And fortunately, my Jeep's got a port that will charge even when the switch is not on. And sometimes the switch has to be on, so some of the older vehicles, that's still the case. So you want it USB-C rechargeable. Now, if your radio runs off alkaline batteries, that's okay too, but you just need a store of alkaline batteries if you want to talk. And guess what's always in short supply right before a hurricane? Alkaline batteries, okay? So, now the next thing you want, let me get out of the way here. The next thing you want is a removable antenna. So I'm going to take this off, take this antenna off, and there, and now I'm going to hook up another antenna. And I've got I've got an adapter here. That little connection is called an SMA connection. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's usually the connection that they use on these little handheld radios. And in this case, this is an SMA female connection, okay? And that is the SMA male connection because there's a tiny little pin in there, and there's no pin here. And sometimes on some radios, this will be an SMA male connection on this end. So they're not standard. You want to be sure if when you order one of these, there's several dollars on. You can get them on Amazon, but those tear up pretty easily. I got this from probably Ham Radio Outlet. And so this is an SMA female connection.
And always get the one with the cord. Don't get the one that's just an all built-in adapter, because now your heavy coax is twisting around on that as you're using it. It will break the connector inside that radio.
Yeah.
So be sure to get one that's got that little cord on there so that you're not putting a strain on that
Yeah,
connector.
you have a little tiny little coax.
Yeah, put all the weight out there.
So now what I'm going to do here is now I have a connection here called an SO239. Now all this terminology is new to you, but you soon get used to it. This is an SO239, this is the female connection, and what I'm going to do is hook it up to this antenna here. Oops. Hook it up to this, and I'll have an antenna. Except now, instead of having that little stubby little, they call it rubber duck antenna that comes with my radio, I've got a much bigger antenna. Now, if this antenna is on a metal baking pan, because it needs what's called a ground plane to kind of reflect signals up to it. But if who's got a metal roof? Anybody got a metal roof? Well, just stick this thing up on top of the metal roof.
That's what you do with your car.
And stick it on top of your car. Yeah, I could put this on top of my Jeep. Well, not on top of my Jeep, because my Jeep's got a plastic top. But if I could put it on the hood of the Jeep, which doesn't work as well, but still, I can put it on top of the car, and I can go down the road and talk.
That antenna will give you about 30 times your signal.
Right.
That much gain. And then this antenna could be on top of your house or up on a tower. Doesn't matter. It's going to keep again, the higher you are, the better that's going to do.
It's much better to have a great antenna and not much radio than to have a great radio and not much antenna. Antenna is what it's all about. And but then it's better still to have a great radio and a great antenna. So that's the best thing. So let me see if anybody. WRZM878. Anybody got a copy on their radio?
You might be able
What
to
channel
key
are
up
you on?
the Gainesville repeater with that
Oh,
stuff.
I think I can.
Are you on channel 15 or 16?
22.
What?
The 22 repeater. This is the Windsor repeater. This is WRZM878.
One more time.
We might be too close. WRZM878.
WRCS 867.
I think we're too close, Sam.
You're not keying up.
I don't know why.
There you go.
That was mine.
You keyed up then.
That was mine.
Oh.
It isn't.
Talk to me. Okay. Now, we're not talking antenna. We're talking.
I'm going to his house is coming back to him.
Right. Now I'm gonna try the,
Government paperwork.
Yeah. We took the scenic route.
Is the Windsor repeater, is that in general?
WRZM878.
Yes.
I just hit the Gainesville repeater on this little 5-watt radio and that little inside antenna. So in other words, if you take that antenna and put it on the roof of your house, you're gonna have a much better signal than if you just use the little rubber duck that came attached to this. So I will take this off. I'll do that in a minute.
You'll hear people joke all the time, we've got names for them. Those rubber duck antennas, they're nothing but a coil spring. They're convenience antennas. You remember the old days you used to telescope the antenna out of your radio to talk? Well, people didn't like doing that, a lot of antennas got broke. So they came up with it, and it's convenient. But it's a very poor antenna.
It's a convenient and crummy antenna.
A lot of us call them radiating dummy loads.
Yeah.
A dummy load is just a more of a test resistor we use to test with. It doesn't talk to anything. This is a radiating dummy load because it just barely gets out. But it is a very poor antenna with, that is a real antenna.
Now, the next thing you want your radio to be is repeater capable. Not all GMRS radios have those extra 8 repeater channels. I think Midland is, a lot of people buy these little Midland handhelds, they're usually, in my understanding, they usually don't have, now I've got a Midland radio there, but it's repeater capable. Midland just came out with a repeater capable radio.
I think Midland and Uniden are the only ones who actually make GMRS radios. Don't know if anybody else is actually making one for the GMRS market.
VTech and Radioddity.
Are they making one built for GMRS?
For what?
Are they making one designed for GMRS?
Yes,
Oh, okay. I haven't seen one of those.
Yeah, Radioddity, I have you can get a Radioddity GM30 for $28 on Amazon.
Oh, okay.
And, you can hook that thing up to a huge antenna and you get a pretty decent signal out. So
I was on channel 20 repeater, not channel 22.
Oh, okay.
That
makes a difference.
That does make a big difference.
Now, something else that could be valuable, it is not absolutely necessary, but to have NOAA weather radio. This right here, let me see if I can remember how I get to it, because every radio is different, you have to read the book.
Like, we read books. We read books about this stuff.
Who can read?
Is normal 5 to 10 knots, increasing to 10 to 15 knots after midnight. Sea is 2 to 3 feet. Wave detail, east 2 feet at 30 seconds and southwest 2 feet at 9 seconds.
Transmitting illegal.
Late and inland waters along.
So that was NOAA weather radio. Before, during, and after a hurricane, it might be nice to listen to NOAA weather radio. And you could probably pick that up with your little rubber duck on there, you know. So NOAA weather radio is nice. An FM commercial radio is nice. That radio there does not have FM. The little $28 GM30 and the little VTech radios that
Some of the boy things are doing it now.
yeah, VTech is a good brand, and so is Radioddity for the little inexpensive radios. They do have a commercial radio station, so that's kind of nice. You know, you can listen to weather reports on commercial radio, or find out where the hurricane is now, or just if you're out of power or everything, you can find out where the hurricane is.
Or you just listen to music on it.
Somebody had a question?
Or you can just listen to music on it.
Yeah.
If you want to.
You can listen
No,
to music,
but-
yeah, you can, I'll
I
put it
got a-
up on top of the refrigerator in the kitchen and listen to it, you know, because it's a little $28 radio, and it's good. Weather resistant, this is up to you. It's, if you're, the weather resistant radios usually cost more, but, the little $28 radios are not weather resistant, but if you just are careful, it's okay. If you run it, you just run the $28 radio, not a.
The radiodities are good.
Yeah, Radioddity is good. And remember wideband, narrowband, remember the bandwidth was 20 kilohertz and sometimes it was 12.5 kilohertz? Well, some of the radios only have the narrowband signal. You don't have a choice to toggle between narrowband and wideband. So if you're talking narrowband and you're talking to somebody that's on wideband, they're gonna think your volume's not turned up, or my volume's not turned up, or whatever. But so if you want one that'll transmit on both wideband and narrowband, but just about everybody uses wideband. But if you happen to have a wideband, narrowband radio and you're talking to somebody that's on narrowband, switch yours to narrowband and then you can hear them better. So, but remember that wideband, narrowband. In other words, if Sam's got a narrowband radio and I've got one that transmit on wide and narrowband, and I'm having a hard time hearing Sam, I will just move mine to narrowband, and now we're on the same bandwidth, and so we can talk, we can understand each other.
What pretty well happened, to kind of give an idea on it, the amount of space that each one of the channels takes up in a radio spectrum is that bandwidth. And as years have progressed, we're running out of frequencies. So in order to do that, they started going from a wideband technology to compressing that audio signal and making it take up a narrower space so we can slide a couple more channels in there and give us more frequencies. And that's what happened between wide and narrow. In GMRS, the FCC spec is still all wideband, so I'm sure that probably the pre-done are probably all set to wideband.
Yes, they are.
It's gonna be more of somebody who takes a commercial radio and programs it and probably didn't program it right. He set it to narrow instead of wide.
Yes, and that can happen. So you want to be, I think Charlie and I were talking the other day, and I could hardly hear him, and come to find out he's on narrowband. And so when he switched to wideband, I could hear him a lot better. Now, there's a lot of stuff to remember here. So if you'll put your email address down here, what I will do is I will email you the slides that I'm using, and plus I will email you the article that I wrote from which these slides are taken. So you can basically go over this whole talk again. And so in case you want to remember it. Mobile base station radios are usually from 15 to 50 watts. Here's a 15 watt radio here. This one is designed basically to be a mobile radio to go in a vehicle. Get untangled here. I can plug this into the cigarette lighter of my Jeep, and I can hook it to that mag mount antenna and put that on the hood, and now I've got a radio in the vehicle. But this is only 15 watts. You don't want to take a 50 watt radio and plug it into your cigarette lighter, because there's a good chance you're going to burn up your wires. So you're going to blow something out. But since it's only 15 watts, it doesn't pull that much power. And it's designed to be plugged into the cigarette lighter. So, and this is a little 15 watt Midland, and works well. I can have it in my vehicle in no time.
Is that a fuse in the red light?
Yes, it is. It's a fuse. So that's a 15, and this is a 40 watt base station. You can get them up to 50 watts. So this was just got a good deal on this one, and the difference between 40 and 50 watts is for what I need is it's not that much difference. So this, you would not want to plug this into the cigarette lighter. If you were going to have this in your vehicle, you would want to install it with the battery. Now, who I recommend in town, unless you're really good at this, if you want a radio installed in your vehicle, a 50 watt radio, I like Ashton Communications on Northwest 6th Street. They put in all the radios for businesses and cop cars and all of that. And they put in my ham radio and did a great job. And it wasn't that terribly expensive. I think they charged me $150, and two guys worked out there a couple of hours, so I don't know if I got a deal or what, but
it's tough getting that wire through that firewall.
Well, those guys worked on that thing, and they got it in there. But if you take it to a sound shop, they're good at putting in stereos, but they don't understand radios a lot of times. So take Ashton, ASHTIN, Ashton Communications. If you ever want a radio in your vehicle, and you don't want to do it yourself, those guys, that's who I would go right back to. So, what did I do with my pointer? Here we go, 15 to 50 watts. Mobile antennas often use, mobile radios often use the mag mount antennas, magnetic mount. Because you see, this is a magnet here that just pops on there and sticks on there, and really, it's not coming off. You can drive down the road 70 miles an hour and it's not coming off. The 15 watts can be plugged into the cigarette lighters. The base stations need a battery, and some people say, oh, I got a power supply. Well, that's wonderful, you got a power supply, but what happens when the lights go out? You don't have any power. Your radio's out. So you can buy these. The kind of batteries I recommend are lithium iron phosphate, Li stands for lithium, Fe stands for iron, and PO stands for phosphate, so they call them LiFePO batteries. And here's one, it's not even as big as a brick, and it's not, I don't think it's quite as heavy as a brick, might be just about as heavy. And it's 12 amp hours, and there's a charger. I didn't bring my charger with me, but you see right here, I can charge it. I can keep it plugged into the wall and keep it plugged in all the time if I want to.
Like having a UPS for your computer.
Exactly, because you can't overcharge or over discharge this battery. So if, let's say after a storm, you're just gonna leave your radio on all the time, just say the power's back on, just plug it into the wall.
And if you want a longer amount of time, cause that battery would probably keep you going for about 12 hours, you normally use. If you want more time, that same company makes some large ones all the way up to the size of car batteries.
They make some big batteries. I mean, yeah, this one with the charger was about $140. That includes the charger. You bought one, didn't you, Candy?
I think this is it.
Yeah, that is it, exactly.
That's a popular one.
That's what you got. Bio-Inno, it's called Bio-Inno Power. And, another company that makes batteries is called Dakota. I haven't used Dakota, and I'm not a real electrical expert, but Bio-Inno works. There's a guy there they're out in California, there's a guy named Kevin that'll answer your questions. And I just like those guys, so I deal with them. And also I've got solar power that I can charge that battery up with solar panels and I've got about 4 of those batteries, so I can keep one, I can charge it up while I'm using it. And a lot of times I'm putting more power in than I'm taking out. So you can run a long time. As long as the sun's out, I can keep charging batteries. So I've got 4 batteries, so I'll just keep them charged.
We've got a portable repeater that we're using with a commercial construction company where they have actually put solar panels on a trailer. And we're using it to keep a battery charged, to keep a repeater running. We've got a 100-watt commercial repeater on it. And it's enough to keep it running constantly with it without having to do any other charging.
And that's great, because repeaters need power too. So, let's see, so, I like a battery, because as Jim said, it's like an uninterruptible power supply. If the lights go out, my radio stays on for, quite a few hours. The more you're transmitting, the more power you use up. So if you're just listening, you don't use up nearly as much power than if you're keying your mic all the time. And you can turn your radio down from 50 watts down to 5 watts. And so if you don't need 50 watts, turn it down to 5 watts, because you use up less power. And when power is in short supply, like after a hurricane or whatever, you could use up less power.
And the receive doesn't hardly use any
Yeah,
power.
receive doesn't use much.
An idea is, keeping in mind when the lights go out, buy a second one. Put a LED disc lamp on it.
And what?
An LED disc light.
Yeah.
You need light in the house as well. Get an LED disc light, put it on a second battery.